We do ask board members and presenters who are speaking to use the microphone equipped. The podium here, or one of the portable microphones, will have Lynn Erickson be the roving microphone person today. Also, we ask the cooperation of the audience to refrain from side conversations during the proceedings, just primarily due to the audio issues that we will face with our webinar and live streaming. Also note that this is a board event. We have a limited amount of time, so it will be the board chairs and the vice chair's prerogative whether we'll be able to recognize speakers from the auditorium for any comments or thoughts that they may wish to share. But if any of you participants, observers today have any suggestions, comments, please send those to us. You have our contact information on the website information. We're always looking for good inputs to see how the Metropolitan Planning Organization effective and fruitful manner advance and add to the effort of our member jurisdictions on addressing the unacceptable level of roadway safety outcomes in our region. So TPB staff are looking forward to today's board discussions as well as guidance on what further actions we could take. And the TPB chair, Ms. Henderson, is going to be joining us. She had another engagement this morning. So in the interim, I'm looking to our vice chair, James Walkinshaw, to get us started. Mr. Walkinshaw, turn it over.
All right, thank you, Kanti, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this very important discussion today, and I want to express my appreciation to the TPB board members who are here with us today, the TPB staff, all of the outside organizations and community members who have joined us to participate today. In 2023, 394 lives were lost on our region's roads due to traffic crashes. And I just want to say something about that. If later today there were a tragic plane crash in our region and 394 lives were lost, the response to that would be overwhelming. There would be outcry across the region. There would be investigations. There would be congressional hearings. There would be new regulations and new laws passed. There would be billions of dollars invested to prevent that kind of tragedy from happening again. Unfortunately, when it comes to traffic fatalities and pedestrian fatalities, we don't have that same level of collective urgency. And it might be because 394 lives weren't lost in one day, in one incident. They were lost over the course of the year in hundreds of incidents. But I would submit to us that we should urge our communities respectively to meet these 394 respective tragedies with the same urgency with which we would meet one mass tragedy where 394 lives were lost. Those 394 lives represent a 3% increase from 2022. Numbers that still remain higher than pre-pandemic levels, when our average number of annual fatalities was 288. Region-wide, pedestrians and bicyclists accounted for 30% of our total traffic fatalities in 2023. In our TPB safety resolution in 2021, we stated that the current safety outcomes on our region's roadways are unacceptable and must be urgently addressed. And we provided a list of recommended strategies for members to pursue. Though many TPB members have acted on many of those recommendations, as well as TPB itself initiating and conducting the regional roadway safety program supporting member agencies, so much more remains to be done, as evidenced in the stubbornly high crash statistics that I shared. At today's Safety Summit, my hope is we can discuss and help all of you to explore newer and more comprehensive approaches to improving roadway safety, as well as to identify additional actions TPB can take as a planning organization to improve roadway safety as quickly as possible. To this end, our summit has three main parts: First, TPB Vice Chair Neil Harris will moderate session number 1, which will include a presentation and discussion on understanding the national and regional safety issues that we face. We'll look at key facts and background information to set the stage for our later discussion of potential actions. First session speakers include Vanessa Holt of Fairfax County staff, who's the chair of TPB's Transportation Safety Subcommittee, who will review our region's safety picture, as well as Nicole Waldheim of the consultant Fair and Peers, who has insights from her national experience addressing safety. Following these short presentations, Vice Chair Harris will lead a discussion for any questions or comments board members may have on this background information. Next, I'll moderate session number 2 with 2 guest speakers who will provide frameworks for the potential strategies TPB and its members can consider. We will be joined by Paul Teicher of the U.S. Department of Transportation Office of the Secretary to discuss U.S. DOT's National Roadway Safety Strategy and Allies in Action program, federal programs that are available to help, and the value of the emerging safe systems approach to roadway safety. Also in that session, we'll welcome Dr. Jeffrey Michael of the Johns Hopkins University Center for Injury Research and Policy, who can provide more detail on the safe systems approach and its implementation. I especially look forward to Dr. Michael's comments on roadway safety success stories around the nation to give us some optimism that we can work on safety and implement projects, programs, and policies that will make a difference and save lives in our region. I'll then lead a discussion for any questions or comments board members might have for those guest speakers or about their presentations. Following sessions 1 and 2, Chair Henderson will moderate session 3, where we as TPB board members will get down to the business of discussing, frankly, the additional steps that TPB and its members can take to improve roadway safety. We have some ideas, and we'll be welcoming all of your ideas during session 3 later this morning so that we can take those recommendations back to the full TPB and not delay the progress that we must make on roadway safety in our region. So thank you all for joining us here today, and I'm going to turn things over to Vice Chair Harris, who will moderate today's first session. Vice Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Walkinshaw. So good morning, everyone. Happy Halloween. Surprised to not see anyone in full garb, but maybe later. I'm happy to moderate session 1 this morning, where we'll have 2 transportation safety practitioners describing our regional and national safety issues. There have been many times when we've discussed our unacceptable roadway safety outcomes, particularly because we need to set goals for how many accidents and how many fatalities, and we're not really comfortable setting a quota for how many people should pass away on our roadways. And we're not even meeting those numbers that we're uncomfortable setting. So that's why we're here today to inspire discussions of safety on our highways and roadways. Like many on the board, I appreciate the chance to delve into the details of our regional transportation safety statistics. So to start off, our Transportation Safety Subcommittee Chair, Vanessa Holt, will cover a few key facts and figures that should help inform our discussions going forward as we go through the day. And next spring, we'll receive a briefing from staff on a currently ongoing update of safety data deep dive analysis that we received a few years ago, and I'm looking forward to that update and hoping for some optimistic results. After Vanessa Holt provides us with a regional picture, we'll then hear from Nicole Waldheim, who has national expertise on why crashes are occurring and how systematic thinking upstream before events occur can have impact. We're pleased that she can join us this morning, as she's helped to develop the curriculum on the Federal Highway Administration and provided training around the country on this very topic. Following their presentations, we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers on those presentations and on what implications this information has for potential actions of TPB and its members. Also, please hold all questions and comments until after both presentations, And with that, I'd like to welcome Vanessa Holt to the podium to give us the regional picture. Ms. Holt, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Vanessa Holt. I'm an engineer at the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. I'm also the chair of the TPB Safety Subcommittee. And today I'm going to be giving you a brief background on the Transportation Safety Subcommittee. I'm going to review regional roadway safety data from two different sources. First is going to be a preview of draft information that's being developed as part of that safety data deep dive that was just referred to. That project is in TPB's 2025 Unified Planning Work Program, which is scheduled to be completed by next spring. Second, I'm going to refer to another set of draft data, which TPB will be seeing in November as part of the annual federally required performance-based planning and programming process and target setting. And I will end with a short summary and then turn things over to my fellow presenter, Nicole Waldheim. So the TPB's Transportation Subcommittee has been convening since 2012 to exchange information and best practices. The org chart on this slide shows the subcommittee as part of the TPB's family of advisory committees and subcommittees. The members of the subcommittee and its discussions are generally practitioner focused. We did a review of the topics that the subcommittee has discussed in recent years, which are all central to our discussions in improving the region's safety. And some of those themes are noted on the right-hand side of this slide. We actively seek feedback from our members to inform the annual subcommittee program and topics. The graph on the left shows the results of our most recent member survey, which indicated interest on a variety of topics. You'll note that we had the highest interest on safety and equity. This slide includes information from the first of the two sets of draft data that I referred to. The left-hand chart shows the regional trend for fatalities from 2010 through 2023. As you can see, after remaining somewhat steady in the early to mid 20-teens, the region has seen increases in fatalities annually since the pandemic. And unfortunately, highlighted by the red circle, as Vice Chair Walkinshaw mentioned, 2023 had the highest total fatalities in recent years, totaling 394. The right-hand chart shows the trend for serious injuries. Serious injuries have been on a generally downward trend since 2010, but there was an uptick in 2023. Preliminary information from staff and consultants data deep dive shows crash types by category for the 5-year analysis period from 2019 to 2023. As you can see on this slide, the most common types for fatal crashes were non-motorist and lane departure. And for serious injury crashes, the most common type was intersection and access management. This summary shows the factors involved in crash fatalities and serious injuries. This is different from the previous slide because a crash only has one crash type, but may have more than one involved factor. If you note on the graph, the blue bars below the green bars depict fatal crash factors, but the graph is ordered for serious injury factors. And the most common involved factors for the region's fatal crashes include being at an intersection, roadway departure, speeding, not wearing a seatbelt, pedestrians hit by vehicle, and impaired driving. The second data preview will accompany the TPB's upcoming annual consideration of highway safety targets as part of the federally required performance-based planning and programming process, which the 5 performance measures that are required in federal law and regulations are shown in this table. They are the measures of fatalities and serious injuries for which the TPB, as the MPO, must use to review recent performance and annually set the 5-year rolling average targets. This is a preview of the draft slide that TPB will be seeing at its November meeting, showing the increase in the absolute numbers of fatalities and serious injuries. You can see because there was a notable increase in vehicle miles of travel in the region, the crash rate per 100 million vehicle miles traveled decreased, even though the number of fatalities and serious injuries increased. This graph depicts the annual percent change in the number of fatalities in the region from 2019 through 2023. Fatalities have increased every year, though you'll note that they did increase less for 2023 than it had in the previous years. Pedestrian fatalities are depicted on this chart as a proportion of total roadway fatalities. I want to note there was a methodological change for data before 2013 and after 2013, so the data may not be comparable. But unfortunately, as you can see, the trend in general has been for an increasing proportion of fatalities to be pedestrians. So in summary, regional fatalities have been rising since the mid-2010s. Regional serious injuries have largely decreased since 2010, but did increase in 2023 to 2,296 serious injuries. The most common involved factors in fatal crashes, as I said, were roadway departure intersections, speeding, not wearing a seatbelt, pedestrians, and impaired driving. Roadway safety overall worsened during the pandemic, though those worsening trends had been becoming evident before. And the Transportation Safety Subcommittee and staff look forward to getting more insights when the ongoing safety data deep dive is completed next spring. And now I will turn it over to Nicole. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, good morning, everybody. Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Waldheim. I am with Fair and Peers, and it's great to be here today. I have spent most of my career working in transportation safety, but 9 years ago, my life changed for the better, right? I had a daughter. And every single day, I do what I do because I don't want anything to happen to my child. So if we can all kind of put that person in our mind, every single day, we'll all be safer stewards of the system. So that's like my one big, like, hey, this is the thing we should all be doing. But with that, I will also move on and talk about some of the national trends as well. So Vanessa just did a really great job painting the picture of the here and now and the crash history in the region. You all saw the statistics that fatalities are trending up. Serious injuries are trending down, but likely not at the numbers that you all are excited about. And so I think now in this meeting in particular, it's just a really nice opportunity for all of us to take a step back. Think about maybe bigger picture. What are some of the system level challenges that we haven't yet addressed because we're putting Band-Aids all over the place? So let's take that step back today in this presentation and start thinking a little bigger about maybe some of the ways we can solve transportation fatalities to really get at the reductions that we want. So next slide. Oh, I've got the clicker. All right. So I've already used the word system and step back. What do those things actually mean? And so this is just a quick example to get you in the mindset of where I'm at today and where I hope that you all can get to with a little bit bigger picture thinking. Is another national pandemic is homelessness, in the same way that motor vehicle crashes are a pandemic. And if we want to put a Band-Aid on homelessness, right, you can see in the middle there, we can start trying to provide homes to unhomed people. But that doesn't benefit everyone. Again, it benefits certain people and it does certain things for a small amount of time. However, there's a lot of underlying things that contribute to homelessness, right? There's addiction challenges. there's not a lot of funding sometimes for social services types of activities. You can see there might be issues with shelter stays and how long people can stay there. And so these are the types of things that I'm going to be talking about today, is how can we think beyond kind of the Band-Aids and the simple solutions? What are some of the bigger things that are really contributing to severe crashes in the region? So again, hopefully that kind of got your mind going and into the big picture framework. You can see breaking it down to what does it mean in terms of transportation safety. Again, I think we do a lot on the right side of that graphic to focus on the here and now and what's happening currently with severe crashes, right? We're putting our Band-Aids on and it's working. It is working. It's not that it's not. But if we really want to make meaningful reductions, we've got to go back a bit. We've got to go to some of the root causes that are causing crashes and try to address those. So again, we can really move the needle and not just kind of limp along with a Band-Aid here and there. So the next 7 slides really outline what are some of the things nationally that people are seeing at the system level. What are our system level challenges? What are some of the root causes to those? And are those things that could be addressed in this region? So Vanessa alluded to this in her slides. The first kind of system level challenge that we're seeing is a lot of pedestrians are getting killed every single year. The figure on the right-hand side in particular really, I think, says a lot about this system-wide challenge. Pedestrian deaths are increasing faster than any other type of traffic fatality, right? So we can't ignore this. And I know that we're not ignoring this, but what are some of the root causes? Why are pedestrians dying at such a high rate in motor vehicle involved crashes? So just a couple of things to be thinking about in terms of, root causes, upstream issues is one, there's just more active living in general. I think post 2020, when we were all locked down, people came out more. So there's more people on the streets. 2, there's more spaces to be active. There's a lot of transit-oriented development. There's a lot of livable communities. But again, how can we address the pedestrians in that sequence? There is a lack of sometimes or an underinvestment in pedestrian facilities. Why? Why is that? And what can we do about that? Again, upstream system issue, pedestrians are dying. How can we address some of those root causes? The next really big system-wide challenge that we face is speed. This is the second highest thing, according to NHTSA data, that is killing people, just behind impairment, right? We know, I always make the analogy, I played sports growing up, right? If I got hit by a baseball when I was a kid at 40 miles an hour, that hurt really bad. Getting hit by a 4,000-pound vehicle is going to kill you, right? So this is a system level trend. What are some of the core issues that we're not maybe thinking about or solving, but that we could? One, it's roadway design. How can we continue to do more with roadway design to either slow vehicles, or if the vehicles are going at a certain speed, make sure everybody's separated. 2, there's a lot of challenges. I live in DC, not necessarily in DC, but with political will for speed management techniques, right? This is a challenge that we see across the country. There's also, again, that lack of funding and underinvestment in separating all road users. It's challenging to do everywhere. The third big system level trend has to deal with equity. This is not a new problem. It's just something that's been brought to light a lot more recently with our new transportation legislation. You can again see the sobering statistic that 70.5% of traffic fatalities are occurring within the Black American community. This is a system challenge that we really need to be thinking about. Again, what are some of the causes of that we might not be addressing on the day-to-day basis? Is again, it's that road design that encourages speed through these communities. There's been the historical underinvestment in these communities, and then there's also along those lines the health disparity with not having this type of infrastructure as a priority in these communities. The fourth system level trend is there's real momentum and groundswell for livability. Hey, people want to be able to walk or bike or live in a place where they can, walk across the street to get to the grocery store. There's a lot of momentum here. There's a lot of complete streets policies, context classification guides. How can we match what we're doing on the road with the users that are also on that roadway? So again, what are some of the upstream route challenges to getting to that livability? We have these policies and guidance in place, but it's not being implemented consistently or uniformly, and it's not always being followed by all of the engineers that we work with to kind of get to the space we want to be in. The next big system level trend that we see is with funding. You can see the figure on the left is how we typically spend our money on safety. A lot of it is, we've got this leftover money, so let's put that toward, a sidewalk in the context of a bigger project. We also have these very specific silos and pots of money. We've got the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and we aren't always thinking bigger about how can we make every single dollar a safety dollar, right? So again, system challenge is the funding is not always set up to address safety. But we're focusing on those traditional funding streams. There's these silos that are challenges. And often, I hear that we're focusing on things like mobility and moving cars versus really prioritizing safety as some of those upstream challenges. And then two more to go in terms of system level issues is the cars themselves. I think this is a really eye-opening figure. The orange part showing that more people outside of their vehicles are now dying in motor vehicle crashes than people inside of their vehicles. And this makes sense because vehicles are a lot safer for the people driving them and riding in them, but they're not as safe for the people outside of the vehicle, right? So what are some of the, again, root causes that we should be thinking about is, one, cars are larger and they're heavier. So if they hit a pedestrian or a bicyclist, that's not good news. Cars are quieter. As a pedestrian, if I have headphones in, I can't always hear when a vehicle is coming up on me. There's a lot of advanced driver systems in the vehicle, but they're not perfect yet in recognizing people outside of the vehicle. And then no matter what, you can still go fast in a car, even if it has automated technology. And then lastly, big kind of system level trend, and if we could just think a little bit more upstream about how to address this is impairment. This is the #1 thing across the nation that is still killing people. And you can see how the numbers have gone up over time. Again, why? Let's go back to the why is this happening so we can think differently about solutions. Is one, there's a real normalized culture of drinking and driving. You have one drink, you have two drinks. Most people are still getting in the car. We should not still be getting in the car with one or two drinks. Two, there's sometimes a lack of transit or rideshare for people who have been at a bar or out and about at night. And then there's still this youth culture, I had it, of immortality, right? The impairment demographic, the one that's killing people the most, is 21 to 24, right? Why? How do we back up in the system, address these things, right? Not the Band-Aids, so that we can really get at meaningful severe crash reduction. So with that, I will pass it back over to Mr. Harris for the facilitated conversation.
All right. Thank you for the presentations. So I'd like to make the Q&A begin with the members of the board if there are any questions. Ms. Waldheim, I have a quick question for you to start it off since I got the microphone already. Where can we have the most impact on all of these? I mean, a lot of these issues are outside of the typical purview of an organization like the Transportation Planning Board. I mean, we're not responsible for people drinking when they're 22 years old. Where can we have the most impact here?
So I just presented you a lot of big things and big challenges, and I recognize that, and sorry, I just wanted to get it all on the table, the things that we should be trying to think about if we really want to make that meaningful impact. So I guess my first piece of advice is what are the couple system level trends and issues that are most relevant here, or the most pressing here? And then for your example on, what can we do on impairment? I think as an MPO in particular, and even as a local agency, there's a lot of opportunities to kind of work backward. If we know that impairment is a challenge and it's killing X amount of people a year, why is it doing that? Let's look at the data. Let's collect data and work backward to try to figure out those contributors, and let's bring people together to have those conversations, because it's not going to just be about transportation professionals. It's going to be about a whole host of other people who need to be involved in these system level challenges, not just the MPO. So that would be my quick answer to that.
All right, thanks. Board members, do we have any questions for? I don't know, Vic.
Yes. Hi, thank you. Sort of, following what you were saying in terms of, looking at the crash itself and then looking back, how much, one thing that we're starting to look at, or try to at least develop a methodology for how to look at, are near misses. We can look at, what some of the factors were, with the crash, especially fatal or serious injury. What are your thoughts on investing in, looking at near misses where, especially if there's an overlay of near misses where there are crashes, but also, are there locations where there are near misses that, aren't necessarily popping up, but with some address, we could make a difference.
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit. I think near miss data is valuable, certainly, and I think it speaks to the graphic that was in Nicole's slide talking about that backward-looking lens, meaning like just looking at crashes that have already happened versus that forward-looking lens. And I think that near miss data oftentimes, near misses occur at those locations where we can predict that there may be crashes. Roadways have common characteristics where crashes have occurred in the past, and we know that we can look at things systemically. I would say there is a challenge in obtaining near miss data. There are sources of, crowdsourced near miss data, and it's incredibly valuable because these are people that live in these communities. However, the concern with that is that data is only as good as the people who are able to report that data to us. And then there are also a lot of emerging technologies that do, video analysis and things with AI that I'm not very well versed in. I have seen some things about that that can analyze near misses at certain locations, but I don't know if we're there yet in using it systemically, but certainly that could be a topic to be discussed.
Yeah, just to add on to that, and folks I work with across the country, there's a real desire to obtain near miss data, and there's a lot of different vendors out there there's competition, so it's making the data more affordable, anywhere from something like probably $10,000 up to hundreds of thousands of dollars that you could spend, but a lot of people are trying to move in this direction, and as Vanessa alluded to, there's a lot of community interest in safety right now. I think all the money going towards safety is allowing people to do a lot more meaningful engagement. So people are getting really excited about it. We put out surveys now. In the past, you put out a survey about something and you're lucky if you get 10 people to answer it. We get surveys now that over 1,000 people are answering, which has just been a really valuable source of information on everything, to include near misses.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Drew Morrison from the Maryland Department of Transportation. Just a couple items. And first, I think to the vice chair's point, I think it will be helpful in this conversation to understand both what we can achieve as an NPO, but also thinking of this and work we do as a regional convening, whether it's through COG or just all of our individual jurisdictions. We might not be able to take the action at TPB, but I think we'll all benefit from recommendations that look at what member jurisdictions can take as leading positions. I want to hone in on two areas that you mentioned. So vehicles, which is certainly outside of our jurisdiction, but there's some federal action going on, I know, around pedestrian protection and rulemaking. So interested to know what the sort of federal advocacy space could look like vis-a-vis how vehicles are designed, how fast vehicles are allowed to go, and what that means for safety. And then on impairment, thinking regionally as well, I know in Maryland, we've spent many years trying to get a better interlock law to do things. We finally made some progress over the last few years. But as a region, are we consistent on our policies around impairment and driving? Are Maryland, Virginia, and DC all at the same level of the laws? And are those laws all as strong as they could or should be? Probably a question that we'd love to explore today as well.
Those are some big questions. I don't know if I've got, the right answer for you. In terms of your advocacy question, I think it's been difficult to engage with the actual vehicle manufacturers. I don't think we've ever had, one at our meeting. So we just try to take a step back and think as an NPO or as a local agency or even as a state DOT, what are the things that we can do within our purview to actually support these new technologies and new cars. And a lot of that comes down to just making sure the roads are maintained, the stripes are bright, that crosswalks are bright, because if the vehicles can see the road, they're going to do better at their job and they're going to do better at seeing pedestrians. And so that's always where I try to focus transportation planners and engineers when it comes to the vehicle conversation, as well as just trying to stay in the loop on what's happening at that level. There's a lot of pilots going on across the country too about just setting up particular corridors so they're ready for like automated or connected vehicles. So that's another opportunity to get involved in and actually I think interact with a lot of vehicle manufacturers that are often more interested in some of those pilots and things like that so that they can make sure their technology is working well. And then in terms of impairment, I think you said you have an ignition interlock laws that just passed. I think that's amazing. It's not uniform across the country. It depends on your advocates and how engaged they are and how much they're being listened to. It has to deal with politics and the will of people to approve these decisions. And it would be great. That's the whole point of this. If we're all working toward the same thing and we can all get on the same page, everybody's got ignition interlock. That's what makes a difference. Not just you doing it and 5 of your peers are not, right? So that's kind of where can we get momentum on some of these consensus items to really make a difference?
Maria Sinner with the Virginia Department of Transportation. On both presentations, there was, from Vanessa's, you had the different type of crashes and the different categories. And it was staggering to me how some of them can be combined as driver error, period, right? And as well as your presentation where impairment is one type of trend, but I'm curious to know, is there a bigger trend, understanding how the driver error impacts safety? I mean, several categories would fall under that. Maybe distracted driving, maybe speeding, as well as impairment. I'm just curious to know.
I mean, I can touch on that a little bit. So yes, driver choices, behaviors obviously influence crash outcomes. I think, traditionally we've thought of it like that. And I know that the safe systems approach also, assumes that, humans are fallible, humans make mistakes. And so I think we can certainly acknowledge, particularly speeding, things like that, attention to pedestrians. But I think we also have to think about, okay, well, how have our roadway environments been built and what is the infrastructure that we have? And how can we change that to then influence driver behavior and maybe reduce driver errors?
Yeah, and I think the national thought process on human behavior is exactly what Vanessa said, is how can we design our roads different so that if someone does look down at their cell phone and looks back on it, they're not dying as a result of that. And I think in theory, that's the best approach and a really good idea, but think about how many miles of transportation network you all have in your counties or your cities or even in the region. How do you even begin to make all those changes on every single road? And so that's where the human behavior piece comes into it. We still have to think about it until we can get that full redesign in place. And I do think that with the influx of so much money for safety right now, it's really giving people a great opportunity to engage their communities and their stakeholders more and get some momentum and excitement on safety. And it's almost like how I started my presentation of what's my thing, that whenever I get in the car, I don't drive fast, I put on my seatbelt, I don't drink and drive. We need to help people figure out what their thing is until we can get to this full design everywhere.
Okay. So I just want to pose this question right now. We're gonna throw it out there, why not wait to the end? You talk about near misses, and has anyone, is there any appetite or is there any discussion about driver's license, annual test or some form of every few years, whatever that looks like, taking your driver's test again? And the reason I say this is because the near misses, many people aren't using their blinkers anymore. You can't cross lanes on a solid line. You can't cross under a red light. There are so many things that people are doing wrong in driving that is literally the driver's test that we take that tells us if we're good drivers or able to drive. And so I'm curious, is there an appetite of anyone discussed or looked at in changing driver behavior? If you can't pass a driver's test, then you probably shouldn't be driving, or to understand the rules of the road again. I just think many people don't follow the rules of the road because we have our license and we kind of make those things up as we go.
Really short answer is no. I was in Portugal this summer and I was in a tuk-tuk and I was doing a tour with my family. And this tuk-tuk driver knew everybody. He was literally, hey, 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 around town. And he saw his sister. He's like, hey, sis. And I was like, oh, what did your sister do? And she worked at the health department. And I said, oh, well, what does she do at the health department? And he said, well, when people annually need to renew their driver's license or, however many years it is, they have to go and they get a physical. She gives people their physicals so that they are deemed suitable to drive. I said, what? Really? That's her job? I thought I misheard. He's like, no, that's what we do here. I was like, wow, that is really cool. I just had to renew my driver's license in DC because it had been 10 years, and I filled out a form online that essentially was like, yeah, I can see, and I'm good to drive. So, but that's not a knock on DC. That's how it is everywhere. So unfortunately, no. But I am seeing with safety, because young drivers are such a challenge, as well as older drivers, there's a lot of momentum and research and interest on how can we make some changes in this space.
Sure. Well, the slide that you showed of the maze with housing now versus managing homelessness. If you take that same metaphor, I notice on a lot of the slides, there's a statistically significant jump at 2020, which clearly circumstantially pretty strongly suggests it's got something to do with COVID and the post-COVID world. I get the sense, it's not a criticism, I just get the sense that we're using our traditional metrics and paradigms to try and grasp something that has taken place much more fundamentally in our society starting in 2020. So we're using our traditional metrics to say, this is what's going on, we're going to solve this narrowly focused silo of metrics. And yet we haven't fully grasped the fundamental change in our society and our driving habits and our walking habits. In Loudoun County, we've had a data center explosion, which I think everybody's pretty familiar with. That started basically coming out of COVID and has transformed the entire environment in Loudoun County. And it's an explosion of demand for digital. So when I see pedestrian accidents going up, the first thing comes to my mind is people have their heads down on their phones while they're crossing the street. I guess my question is there any move afoot to try and dig deeper into the more fundamental transportation, complete genetic changes that have taken place in the post-COVID world?
Really big questions. These are really big questions. This mic is done.
Got it. Okay. Another really big question. I mean, if you look back the last 20 years, there's still been somewhere in the range of like 30 to 40,000 motor vehicle crashes per year, right? We've never really made great progress. Like it's gone up, it's gone down, right? So there's still these huge underlying things that we're not thinking about because it's hard to do. It's really hard to get all the right people in the room. It's really hard to look at all the right data. It's really hard to get people to care. It's like what Mr. Walkinshaw talked about when he started us off. If 300 some odd people died in a crash today, uproar, 300 some odd people died in motor vehicle crashes. It's not there. So I would say that we have been a little bit more focused on the trends since COVID because the speed and the pedestrian numbers have been so significant in that time. But I would argue that they've been significant probably for the last 20 years. That was just the thing that made us take notice. And the fact that there's so much money for transportation safety right now is another thing that's kind of made us take notice. But if we could get, and some of the things that you're talking about, if we could just step away from the crash data for 1 minute and think a little bit bigger about one of the problems, one of the system-wide challenges, I feel like we'd really move the needle instead of continuing to spin our wheels on stuff.
Go ahead, Bob.
This is a comment and a question. Brief, but it's teed up for later in the agenda today to talk about what we might do moving forward. But are there regions in the country that we should look to Drew's point, that are working well together with making sure a region operates consistently so that when you drive from one jurisdiction to another over state boundaries, there's consistency with how speed limits are enforced, how automated traffic enforcement is enforced, how interlock is enforced, because people will go out in the district and drink and drive back to Virginia, vice versa. Live, work, and play all over the region. And to Supervisor Anger's point, a little bit of a twist, if the District of Columbia has a universe of individuals, and they do, who cannot renew a license plate because they have violated the law so often, so continuously, in such a dangerous fashion, should we be able to work together and have Maryland and Virginia agree, and I'll pick on Virginia because I'm from Virginia, we're here, but that they can't come to Virginia and get a Virginia license plate. I'm going to two statistics, and I ran it by Conti yesterday that I was astounded by. And I did not realize that a lot of work in Virginia, that you can have a license plate here, but you can have domicile in another jurisdiction. So how many individuals have residence or domicile in the district, but have a Virginia license plate? So over 14,000 district residents. So over 100,000 residents of Maryland have an address in Maryland, but a license plate in Virginia. And there is a subset of those individuals who are doing this because they can't get a license plate renewed in the district because they are driving so dangerously. So perhaps we could agree to, on some subset, if you get a ticket every month for a year, we all agree we're not going to renew license plates. But there seem to be some things through our DMVs that we can do, and we'll talk a little bit about automated enforcement later. But is there a region that's getting this right? Because it doesn't seem like we're coordinating on this topic and getting it right.
Short answer, no. Longer answer is I think some localities are starting to get it right, but they're looking at what's within their purview, right? Maybe they're only looking at their city streets. I can't even tell you how many analyses we do where people say, well, let's exclude the county roads in our area and let's exclude the state roads, right? That is not a holistic approach to solving the problem. You are solving your own problem. The MPO, and I think this it's working in some regions where these conversations are happening, but I think the role of the MPO, right, is exactly what you said, is how can we all come to this table, right? Maryland, Virginia, DC, local agencies to kind of pick a couple of things that we have shared consensus on, we want to share resources on, we want to share focus on, and how can we have those conversations where we're all working together towards these things? Because to Drew's point earlier, if everyone's just doing their own thing, it's still not going to work. So, Vanessa?
We have a question from one of our board members online, Kelly Russell. Can you unmute and ask your question?
All right, this time, can you hear me? Can you hear me this time?
Still hear you.
You cannot hear me?
And
Oh, okay, great. I guess if you responded. So I just wanted to go back to the discussion about the bad driving, not signaling, and enforcement of that. What's happened in the last 5 years is that there is less availability of law enforcement to enforce these minor infractions. Less resources are being placed there. There's also been a very robust discussion about minimizing contacts with police and drivers in adversarial positions. When you get pulled over, it's not because you wanted to. And so there's a lot, and we've had this discussion at TPB several years ago. There's some resistance to, enforcing these more minor infractions. And then even more so with regard to, say, an expired license plate, those things that are not safety related. A lot of police departments are just stepping away and not even making contact with those. So I wonder, how do we get more and better enforcement of those minor driving habits that become problematic later on?
I don't know if we can at such a small scale. So the things that I was thinking about were, when you were talking, is one is automated enforcement in whatever form it looks like works, right? So it takes the actual police out of the equation. It just need to be really thoughtful and strategic on where those cameras are going. The other thing that really works for enforcement is changes to the roadway. In DC, there are no right turn on red everywhere now. I never turn right on red. I travel a lot for work. I go to another city and I'm sitting there and people are beeping at me because they're like, go lady. I was like, oh, no, oh wait, I can turn right on red here. So that is another really nice self-enforcement technique. And then in terms of maybe some of the minor violations, I think if you really honed in on a topic area like distraction or impairment, you said, let's go deep on this. There are just cameras everywhere. There's cameras at all the intersections. I think you could work with your operations managers to pull some of that data to try to start parsing through a little bit, like what are some of the behaviors happening related to that topic area, to be able to move the needle a little bit and understand what's happening out there and what the enforcement of that might look like.
Well, I'll just add, being from the state of Maryland, we don't have cameras everywhere. We have very restrictive ability to use speed cameras. And a no turn on red sign is one of those very things that is not going to be enforced, that people will disregard. So it's, again, I'm sorry, I go back to that. I've seen it every day for years and years. People just don't obey the traffic signals. And unless there's some consequence, they know that there's nobody out there enforcing them. it's not going to change that behavior. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that point and definitely agree. It's just like, yeah, what are some of the little things that we can maybe move the needle on where possible? But yeah, I appreciate your feedback.
I want to tell a story, and it's kind of funny, but it's really not. One of our partners that operates the I-95 corridor, Transurban, did several focus groups as well as some surveys, thousands of people. And it was directed about drivers' behavior, kind of picking up on what Mr. Andre is saying, Supervisor Andre. And 100% of the responses, 100% indicated that they felt they were above average drivers. And it was everybody else. So that is the mainstream thinking, that if you have a license to drive and you're driving, you're okay. So Transurban, in partnership with us and DMV, is putting out some messages pretty soon about defensive driving, kind of like picking up of what that focus group is indicated, but at the same time, doing that play on beyond the defensive, pay attention for everybody else. And again, I may understand that enforcement is very powerful, but I think that using technology, using the ready tools that we have out there could be as powerful tool to try to, influence the drivers.
So real quick, yeah, I'm sorry, can't help. We're talking about enforcement technology, automated traffic enforcement. I'm convinced that if we come together as a region and talk about automated traffic enforcement, we can figure out something where it comes to ticket reciprocity, which is like the elephant in the room right now. Averages in 2021 and 23 for individuals driving 25 miles per hour over the speed limit. DC 1,300, and this is the district. Maryland 3,500, Virginia 2,000 individuals. That's 7,800 folks driving over the speed limit. There's no reciprocity for the district with Maryland and Virginia. There's no enforcement or points on those individuals' licenses. We know who's driving dangerously. From 2000 to now, 7.3 million tickets have gone unpaid. 82% of those tickets are sitting in Virginia and Maryland. $1.6 billion. So we need to kind of talk about that, because if we want to curb those behaviors that we're saying we need to curb, then we need to enforce those rules, and those rules need to be consistent. We need to agree. Virginia needs to agree, yes, we don't want people driving 25 miles per hour over the speed limit. And if captured on a camera, we will enforce it in Virginia. Because it's the same dangerous drivers driving all over the region. But we have that automated enforcement now, and it's going unenforced to the tune, I think it's $300 or $400 million a year in tickets in Virginia and Maryland that are going unpaid. Getting back to the comment I made earlier, those district drivers that can't get their driver's plates renewed because they're dangerous can come across the river and get a driver's plate for Virginia. And there's TikToks and viral videos saying, hey, if you can't get your license plate in the district, Maryland, come over to Virginia. All you need is an address associated, and you can get a license plate. So, I mean, I think this is like a really right area to come and kind of agree. And I talked with the district and DMV and said, you're going to have to compromise on some things in terms of forgiveness for accumulated fines. We're going to have to make sure it's consistent with Maryland, Virginia, but we have the cameras and we've got the folks violating the laws, and we're just not enforcing them right now.
I see that it's 10 o'clock, and I think you just perfectly summarized what I was hoping would come out of having a conversation about system issues. Is what are the couple of system issues that this group can really identify, take the lead on, and really make momentum, again, to be the thing that really tips the needle in terms of reducing severe crashes. So thanks for that summary at the end there.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Can you hear me okay? Thanks. Vanessa, can you go back to the major causes of crashes in the region? Because I think we want to keep those metrics always in front of us, whether we're talking about immediate actions, whether it be enforcement or system actions. Now, if I recall, it was intersections, speeding, not wearing seatbelts, DUI, and what else? Why don't you give us the list? Because I want to make sure as we move forward, because we're already talking about things to do, which is great. But I want to make sure we're constantly going back to what are the issues here.
Sure, so the other ones included roadway departure, as well as pedestrians being hit by a vehicle. And so, you know, those are a variety. I mean, some of those don't necessarily happen in our areas with more urban context. You know, sometimes they do, but a roadway departure crash typically isn't happening in an urban area. So there are definitely different focus areas. You know, speeding and pedestrians, I mean, those are two of the top factors and they go hand in hand, I think. But the factors are pretty all encompassing. So I think we need a different approach for each of them. You know, the seatbelts and impaired driving certainly go back to the enforcement issue that people have been talking about this morning. And then there's an education piece and, you know, the design piece. How do we change the built environment?
Right, so we're already going to what we do. Let me go back to, I want to make sure we've got some precision though on exactly what the scenarios are here. If I recall, you listed at least at one point, the intersection accidents, speeding, not wearing seatbelts, DUI.
Yes.
And what else? Because I want to make sure we keep focused on what are the things that we're trying to address.
Sure. So the list that I gave in orders for the factors in fatal crashes were intersections, roadway departure, speeding, not wearing a seatbelt, pedestrians hit by a vehicle, and impaired driving.
Thanks very much. I just wanted that to be very clear, at least in my view, that defines, at least for purposes of this particular effort, what we're trying to get at. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Henderson, Chair of TPB. Apologies for being late. We are gonna go on headed through. I know the agenda says that we're supposed to take a break, but we're gonna just power through to the next panel. So feel free if you do have to, you want to get some water, go to the restroom, do all the things. Feel free to go ahead and take care of that. But we're gonna move to session 2, which is the safe system approach and US DOT allies in action. And I'm gonna turn it over to James Walkinshaw, who's gonna moderate that.
Thank you, Chair Henderson, and good morning again, everyone. Thank you to our presenters from the first session. Really powerful information there, and looking forward to session number 2. We're going to hear from Paul Teicher. Is Paul here? Paul, okay, great. Come on up, Paul, from the U.S. Department of Transportation, Office of the Secretary, who will discuss federal goals, guidance, and programs that are available to us to address safety. Then we'll hear from Dr. Jeffrey Michael of Johns Hopkins University, who will tell us more about addressing safety through the comprehensive safe system approach, as well as hopefully providing us some inspiration through discussion of other regions that have had some success in addressing safety issues. How did they come together and what made a difference for them? I recommend we're going to hold all of our questions and comments until both presenters are finished. And with that, I want to welcome Paul Teicher to the podium. Paul.
Great, thank you. We can go ahead and pull the PowerPoint. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Teicher. I'm with the U.S. Department of Transportation. I work in the Office of the Secretary. In the policy office and separating the career staff, but I work a lot with political appointees from the secretary to the secretary for policy and on down. And I'm going to talk really about 2 different things. One about the efforts at the U.S. Department of Transportation related to roadway safety that I think has some nexus with some of the conversations we're having today. And I'm going to talk about some opportunities that we have at the federal level that I think might be also something that would be both the board members as well as the MW call. So the National Roadway Safety Strategy is the U.S. Department's primary comprehensive approach to addressing roadway safety. there's a few different components that I'll talk through, but I think as good level setting, you already kind of got a little bit of data from a few minutes ago, but if you look over however many decades, we've had kind of a slow decline in roadway fatalities over time, knowing that there's like kind of bumps along the way, with particularly, 2020, 2021, and 2022 having a pretty significant increase in fatalities. And we hadn't been above 40,000 people dying on roadways at a national level for years. And, with COVID and the pandemic, the public health crisis, there were a lot of changes, and there's a pretty large increase. And so it's something that was pretty alarming for us at the federal level, and something we really wanted to have addressed. I think maybe a nice silver lining, and I think part of what's important talking about safety is not just always talking about doom and gloom, but lifting up things that are positive and opportunities to lift up of best practices and things that we really want to shine a light on. And for us, we still have too many people dying on our roads, but for the past 2 years, we've seen a rate of decline about double the historic average. And so we're starting to think that, there's still too many people dying, but we're starting to bend the curve, which is really, really nice to see. The cadence and the communication from the department has been one that I think has been really exciting to see from a safety perspective, from the secretary on down. I'll just read the secretary quote. When it comes to roadway deaths, we have a crisis that's urgent, unacceptable, and preventable. We cannot and must not accept that these fatalities are somehow a inevitable part of life in America. And I think this type of language helps provide the support and really the leadership in order to be able to address issues in ways that I think have been challenging in the past to do. And so this is really kind of one of the underpinning things. And one of the nice things about the National Roadway Safety Strategy is how we communicated and talked about this issue and how we framed it from the top leadership on down, which I think is very important. There's a few different elements that I'll talk through quickly about the National Roadway Safety Strategy. First, that we set a vision and a goal for the nation, that we adopted the safe system approach, that we said that we're going to take significant actions that are going to reduce fatalities, and tracking that, and then knowing that US DOT, we're an 800-pound gorilla, have a lot of influence, but we're not the only people who influence the roadway system. And so working with our partners through a call to action. One piece I know that might be a conversation topic is the idea of committing to a vision of zero. And there's a lot of communities in this region who have already done so. At the department, we made an explicit commitment to having zero fatalities on our roadways. And we paired that through our US DOT strategic plan, a significant reduction by a year. So we say our aspirational goal is zero, and we want a 2/3 reduction in fatalities by 2040. That was intentional in that I think some places, including those in the room, have said zero by X date, and we decided to decouple those to knowing that at the national level, it's going to be tough, and there's going to be a lot of change, but we really want that to be our guiding star, and then go for that really ambitious reduction. That's something to consider as you're thinking about how you would possibly commit to zero, whether you want it to tie it together and be separate, and I think there's multiple ways to do it. I think folks have already have a lot of familiarity with the safe system approach, but I think it's worthwhile to just bring it up in my own words, because sometimes people talk about it in different ways. So US DOT adopted the safe system approach. It is, in my view, an idea that people are not perfect, people make mistakes, and they have to create a system in order to account for the way that people interact through a series of interventions and redundancies so that you stop crashes from happening in the first place. And then if a crash does happen, that people are cared for and the harm is mitigated so that someone who might have died, it's an injury, someone who would have had injury just as a fender bender. And I think there's different elements and kind of a complete holistic scope that you can do that through safer people, safer vehicles, safer roads, safer speeds, and post-crash care. So covering all the different elements that both happen to prevent a crash from happening in the first place, and then preventing the severity should one occur. I said that we have identified some significant actions that we're taking, and I think one important aspect to committing to zero and going through this process is that actually like specific tangible things that we're doing. And so part of what we have been doing at the USDOT level has been, we've identified specific actions across the safe system approach, the 5 different elements that are going to lead to significant progress and things that are the locus of our control. As a way to show that, it's not just words, we have like specific things and deliverables. And so we have a tracker that showcases our progress, our updates. To date, we've closed about half of those actions or made significant progress. I'm expecting most of those to be closed by the end of the year with some carrying on through 2025. So that's a nice way to have that level of accountability that I think is important to show for the public and for our stakeholders. I mentioned the importance of communication. I think one thing that is thoughtful and important to do is having that sense of like, what is our message and what does it look like? And so at the USDOT level, we would try to be more intentional about some of our language. At the department, we get a census of traffic fatalities, the fatality analysis reporting system, FARS data, and we would use that to build a lot of data visualizations. I think it's important just a way to identify, showcase to the public, who's the stakeholders, kind of what's happening on our roadways and get more insights. And I'll give you a few examples of what we've done. So hotspots are pretty, typical and easy to do. We also, once you drill down into this hotspot map and one of our story maps that we have online, you can actually have these little kind of purple pink dots on the map. It's kind of hard to see from here, but what's that Arlington County, Virginia example? And you can click on a dot and you actually can get the Google Street View. The Google Street View is not exactly as it was during the crash, but it's probably a close approximation. You can kind of see what it looks like, the built environment, those type of things. And, maybe some changes have occurred since that crash happened. But it shows fatal crashes and you can get a really good sense. And having that visual image, I think, is really powerful for people to look at. We've also been focusing on pedestrian safety with pedestrians being every year a higher and higher proportion of overall fatalities across the nation. And I think in this area in particular, compared to other parts, pedestrian safety is kind of an even bigger share compared to the national average. So we did a story map focused on the problems, and we identified not just the problems and talked about them, but also describing like the nature of those and then how we could potentially solve them with some of the resources that we have, some of the activities that the department's doing, et cetera. So we focused on safer crossings, appropriate driving speeds, and improving visibility. I know that you all, I think, hit on the first two just a few minutes ago. And so those things we have, and having those nice images, and it is both Halloween, where a lot of people will be out at night, as well as the last day of pedestrian safety month, which is in October. So I figured a good visual thing, it could be pretty simple, and these type of things could be illuminate, help inform what your decision making looks like. So across the nation, about 3/4 of pedestrian fatalities occur at night. I mentioned before that it's important to talk about multiple different ways to think about it, not both places, things that are happening that I think should be lifted up, as well as, areas that need to be addressed. And so these are just examples of pictures that, and in our perspective, I really prioritize people walking, biking, rolling. You can see separated bike lanes, different intersection treatments. And, I think when people think about zero, I think one of the common criticisms or naysaying is that it's impossible to get to zero. Like that's just silly. And I think, we are starting to see at the nation that there are places that are reaching zero. So there are communities that have had multiple years with zero fatalities with 50, 60,000 people in them. Edina, Minnesota, Evanston, Illinois, Hoboken, New Jersey. These places aren't that different than suburban DMV area, and they have achieved zero. And I think those are, nice things, that they've been doing, and they have a series of redundancies, other things, and, maybe there's a little bit of luck and a little bit of investment that comes into it, but highlighting those places and knowing that there are places with significant population where no one has died for years and years and years is really nice to lift up. So the other piece that is worth talking about is, the department's doing a whole bunch of actions, and we've also asked our stakeholders to commit to being an ally in action through a call to action. And so the secretary started this about a year-ish ago, a year and a half, and we have over 180 allies in action. And these are stakeholders, and they run the government at all local, regional, state level. they're private sector entities, they are nonprofits and advocacy groups who have committed to specific tangible activities that they're going to do above and beyond what they normally do in order to kind of supercharge their roadway safety efforts. And this is something that has been really exciting to see, and the amount of cross-pollination and idea generation from the group who has been part of this Allies in Action has been nice. They've had engagements and events and webinars and other things. And we would be really excited to have MWCOG or other members here who are not Allies in Action be part of that system. I think we're going to have a nice big event at the end of the year, other things that will be going on. We'd love to have you participate in those type of pieces. I do want to lift up some examples, and this might be kind of tiny on the screen, but there are a lot of folks who are working with you all that have already committed. So I just wanted to shout out the district where they have not one but two different groups that have committed to specific activities. Maryland has three. Virginia, at least what I could find, VDOT has one as well, and then Transurban, which I think was mentioned previous. And if you get an idea of kind of what we're looking for of that specific tangible, DDOT has committed to placing 90 new speed safety cameras across their high injury network, and their operations and infrastructure office has 31 innovation grants for impaired driving. VDOT is updating their speed limit setting process and then has a focus on appropriate speeds for places that have a lot of vulnerable road users. And these are the type of specific activities that change your policies, your practice, or like the finite specific deliverable that you're doing that we're really looking for. And these are the things that we're really excited to have folks join us in our goal for zero, and something that we would be happy to talk with you all about in terms of how might be appropriate for the jurisdiction from your board membership or from the MWCOG itself. I just have some links and our story maps. You can go ahead and take a look, and that's embedded in the website that's online, so you can go ahead and peruse those at your leisure. All right. My second part of my presentation, I'm going to focus on federal resources. So there, with the bipartisan infrastructure law or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, there's just been billions and billions and billions of dollars that have been made available through the U.S. Department of Transportation that focus on all different types of activities, including roadway safety. And there's just, every year we're giving out billions and billions, and it's something that I think for this membership and for this, the regional government, I just want to highlight some of the resources we have, because there are like dozens of new programs and it's hard to keep them all straight. And it's hard to figure out which ones you want to put your time, money, and energy to. So we've created a few resources to do that. We have a DOT discretionary grants dashboard. You can kind of search and filter based on, so you're an MPO, you can search and see which grants you'd be eligible for. You can put in keywords, other things. That's a nice way to see what's available and what might be coming down the pike. The other one is the DOT Navigator. And this one has a whole bunch of technical assistance. So a lot of the discretionary grant programs have eligibilities for cities, counties, others who maybe aren't used to applying for grants. And so we have a lot of resources, training, funding opportunity, pieces that touch on various different topics to allow like kind of get information to get up to speed. We are in year 3 of the infrastructure law, and 4 depending on how you count fiscal year. And we have another 2 years worth of funding, and there's still a lot of good things. And I'll note that there are some key roadway safety discretionary grants, one that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but almost all of them touch safety in some way, shape, or form. So even if you're doing a transit related piece or one that is improving state of good repair, there's still safety items that are included both in those notice of funding opportunities and how you can scope out the work. So I would encourage to think broadly of how you can leverage these dollars, not just the ones that maybe don't say specifically safety, but ones that could provide safety benefits and a climate benefit or address a state of good repair issue. I am the program manager for the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. It is near and dear to my heart. So I figured I'd give you all a little bit of a primer here, knowing that a lot of the folks who are here have applied for state funds and also might be interested in the program, and to talk a little bit about opportunities, since I know there's a really nice kind of connection between what MWCOG is doing, and what we could potentially fund through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. So it's a $5 billion discretionary grant program. We are finishing up year 3 with final announcements for some remaining funds in the next few weeks. So there's still $2 billion more, which is a lot. And the goal and the purpose is to reduce death and serious injuries on our roadways. And it has 2 different parts. It's kind of, you develop a comprehensive safety action plan and then you implement it. That's kind of the 2 pieces of it. And I think one thing that makes this unique is that it covers all different types of safety interventions. So it can be operational, it can be behavioral, it can be infrastructure. You can mix and match and do all 3. And we've seen all 3 as part of the awards that we've given. I think one kind of interesting aspect is that we funded some really interesting different things. And I think having that creativity and flexibility allows places and regions like you all to be able to pick what's most important based on like how do you think you want to invest your time, money, and energy. And this, a lot of the eligibility allows for it, assuming it has that direct connection to reducing fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. I'm just going to toot my horn for a second. So today we've done $2.7 billion in the funding awards to over 1,400 communities in all 50 states and Puerto Rico, covering about 75% of the nation with planning activities. The District of Columbia has yet to receive funding to change that to one of these states. But we have all 50 states, and it's something that I think we would be happy to work with and talk with the membership here or others in having having representation from an entity that will put some funding in the District of Columbia. With the caveat that the program is intended for those who are not state DOTs, and so DDOT was not an eligible entity, and that's been some of the difference. I'll note that, I mentioned that we have lots of new discretionary grant programs, and there's a lot of folks who are applying for programs that we wouldn't have a direct relationship with the federal government before. At least with SS-Spray, it's tailored for addressing and working with people with lower capacity, communities with lower capacity, maybe first-time funding applicants, and over half our award recipients are new direct funding recipients, which is a lot. It's 700. And the federal requirements are a thing. We have resources in place to help folks. Some eligible activities. We have some eligible recipients. So MPOs, counties, cities, special districts, tribal governments, or some combination thereof. And then for eligible activities, I mentioned you develop a comprehensive safety action plan, and then you implement it. And I'm going to dive in because a lot of the work that the MWCOG does is kind of more on that planning-ish type of thing and the regional scale. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the activities there in a minute. But I also wanted to highlight some of the jurisdictions that have received funding to date. So Peachey County, City of Mount Rainier, the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, as well as Fairfax County, they've all received millions of dollars to be able to advance roadway safety through the SS-Spray program. So Prince George's that has at least 5 or 6 different corridors that they're making improvements on. Mount Rainier is doing the systemic pieces and kind of their small jurisdiction size that both touches on infrastructure, operational, and some of that addresses some of those behavioral pieces that they found. Fairfax County is developing a plan as well as doing a slow streets pilot. And that gets to like the idea of being able to develop a plan as well as kind of test things out, which is what I'll talk about next. And one of the cool parts about the program is that you develop an action plan and then you go ahead and implement it. We actually have a kind of an intermediary step, which is that right-hand side of demonstration activities. And this is the testing it out. So this is short-term, temporary activities to try things out to see if it works in your community before implementing it on a wider scale or before ripping up a bunch of concrete. So the example on the picture here is a quick build where they reallocated the road space, created a separated bike lane, put some plastic ballers up, some paint, and that's something that's eligible as part of a demonstration activity. We also have done pilots. That Fairfax one, that slow streets example would be a good one. Pilot program for new technology. We've had folks asked for testing out preemption for emergency vehicles and changing some of their streetlights along some major corridors so that we get EMS vehicles quickly to and from where the hospital is and you know, where the site of the crash would be. There's also, you can test out the engineering studies related to the manual on uniform traffic control devices. That's like trying out like pedestrian hybrid beacons, rapid rectangular flashing beacons, things like that. I will note, you know, in addition to those, there's also planning efforts. So maybe a lot of the folks here already have pretty robust plans. Maybe they want to do road safety audits on a corridor of interest. Maybe they want to focus on equity. Maybe they want to do some additional stakeholder engagement or data collection. All those things are potentially eligible. And just looking at a lot of the activities that this group is doing and MWCOG, there's a lot of things that would be potentially eligible in this space. And I think a part of it is just having the right, the funding available and the right processes to work together. And that's something that, you know, happy to have a conversation between USDOT and then WCOG and other folks on how to make arrangements or give examples of what's worked in the past that might inspire you all. Because we've had MPOs that have like a dozen cities that are all doing quick builds, and so they do work at the MPO. They've done, you know, road safety audits across the entire region on behalf of multiple counties, things like that. There's some good examples that we could look up for you all. I think that's it. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Jeff Michael, and he can give some more examples and maybe give some good case studies that could help inspire you all.
All right, thank you, Paul. Dr. Michael, you are up. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be able to speak to the board. My name is Jeff Michael. I'm with Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. I've been there about 6 years. Prior to that, I was with the U.S. Department of Transportation. And at NHTSA, I worked with Dick Weisberg. So I have sort of a combined safety and public health perspective to share with you. But I want to go just a little further, safe system approach, very forward from Paul's point, and then give you some examples. But very good. Oops. So first, I want to point out that I think that this region is gifted with Vision Zero programs. There may be more Vision Zero programs in this area of the country than any other. And this is terrific. These are all good examples, and several of them are really national models that have been longstanding and are viewed as quite effective. Wade Holland here, who is running the Montgomery County Vision Zero program, which is one of those that's nationally recognized quite often. But I think this puts the Transportation Planning Board in a good position, a position where there's something to contribute, which may involve, you know, starting Vision Zero programs, but it may involve more than that, maybe coordinating and collaborating a level above the operation of the programs. So that's kind of where I want to focus here. And I want to circle back to the principles of Vision Zero and Safe System. First of all, you know, to clarify, these are the same thing. You know, Vision Zero and Safe System is really the same thing. Sometimes the terms are used a little differently, but they really mean the same thing. It's really the same set of principles we're dealing with. And Paul showed the wheel up in the upper right corner. That's, you know, very common depiction of safe system topology, which involves, you know, each of those segments. But of course, it's more than that, and the pyramid, it sort of shows another dimension. The pyramid, this is sort of bringing in my public health world. The public health people have a pyramid, public health pyramid that they refer to often. It's really all about prevention. It's all about doing a lot of work on the environmental level to affect the individuals which are up at the top of the pyramid. This is a translation of that public health pyramid to safe system. And it shows the same thing. It shows that, that efforts that, safety efforts that are focused on the individual and that expect the individual to take action tend to be the least effective in resulting in population health impacts. It's the interventions which are down at the bottom of the pyramid which have the greatest population health impact. And the safe system approach, as commonly described, is sort of in the middle there. It's a combination of the latent safety measures that sort of are invisible to individuals, the technology built into your cars, the design of roadways with road diets, roundabouts, and so forth, and built environment. And so that's sort of the typical safe system discussion. And there's actually, from a public health point of view, even a lower one, this socioeconomic factors. It's not considered as much, but I think it's relevant here. And this is, I think, much of what Nicole was talking about, which is about sort of land use policy, how you design transportation in the area. Does your transportation design require great numbers of people to commute long distances and have high exposure to traffic risk? Does it prevent other populations from having enough mobility to get to jobs, to get to healthcare, to get to educational opportunities? That's really the socioeconomic layer. But all of this has to be done, and it's not to diminish the efforts that are focused on the individual, the education, driver licensing, et cetera. But it's to point out that you need to do a little bit of that, but you need to do a lot of the other stuff. And that's sort of the public hearing. And the impact of this is really inevitable. It's not really a question of whether it will work. It's very fundamental, it's fundamental causation of crashes, the exchange of energy, the body absorbing too much energy. So it's reducing the energy in the system and it's accommodating human error. And so if you do those things, it will work. And the real question about safe system vision zero is, can you do them? Can you do enough of them? Can you do them thoroughly and over a period of time to make a difference? That's the real question. It's not will it work, it's can we do it, really is the question. And I think an MPO can have a big role here. This is all kind of new, so I have one example to share with you, but I don't know of a lot of others. This might be an opportunity for this MPO to set a national example. But the MPO can work sort of above the activity of Community Vision Zero programs and do a level of coordination and collaboration and leadership that I think would be very helpful. There's a manual from the Highway Administration here that addresses some of these issues. There's a similar application from the Vision Zero Network and advocacy group that addresses the same role of MPO in Vision Zero safe system implementation. They hit these kinds of points that an MPO could be focused on regional safety vision, could do, perhaps periodic meetings, gather the Vision Zero programs in the region and sort of keep them pointed towards the upstream dimension as an opponent. Keep them pointed upstream, sort of the bottom of the pyramid, gather them and have them sort of keep their eye on the ball. I think it's difficult, very challenging to run a Vision Zero program because you're really trying to, change habits that have been built into the roadway institutions for 100 years. And so it's likely that the the jurisdictional programs, the city programs, county programs, need to be reminded periodically that you gotta, are you doing enough? Are you doing enough with the base of the pyramid? So I think having the MPO do this coordination collaboration would be very good. Coordinating focus on key problems in the area, which is going to be speed in many areas. There's also some efficiencies, I think, across the region that MPO could address, engaging the public, sort of nurturing a culture of safety in the area with consistency of policies and so forth. And there could also be leadership through, I know you're doing some of this performance measurement and target setting for the zero programs. So that's the kind of suggestions that come out of publications. I was working with the Institute of Transportation Engineers recently and the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety on a couple of manuals that I wanted to share with you. These are guidance manuals. One, and they're really aimed at local programs to help them implement safe system approach. One of them is aimed at sort of frontline people, safety advocates who are talking to the community members sort of on a daily basis about changes that they'll see with the safe system, roundabouts, road diets, other changes that we want the community to understand why they're coming and to understand why it may take a few minutes longer. There's safety benefit. The other is aimed at sort of the DOT level people, and that's sort of a process-oriented guidance that is about how to establish the partnerships and the collaboration at the sort of county level that are necessary for a safe system approach. So as part of that, we did some case studies, and so I'll pick up those. These are really process case studies, so it's sort of based on this inevitability. If you do it, it will work. So the question is, can you do it? And what we did is went out and talked to about 30 local programs that were doing safe systems and talked to them about what they're doing, sort of what worked and what their challenges were. And we sort of identified, first identified that there's no one way to do this. They're all doing it sort of differently. But there are some commonalities. There's commonalities in roles that the ones that seem to be getting ahead seem to have identifiable roles like, leadership or some influencers, some implementers, and a supportive community. They also seem to go through some phases like, getting started phase, building, sort of building momentum and institutionalization and sustainability. So we could begin sort of categorizing what they were doing, and we picked a dozen or so to do case studies which represented a sort of cross-section of community types that were sort of following these steps in implementation. So I'll just tell you about a few of those. One of them is the MPO, now TPO, in Hillsborough, Florida. This was the only MPO we looked at. They served a little different role than I think would happen here, but an interesting one. They were in a region where there were no Vision Zero programs, but they were in the top 10 highest fatality rate counties in the nation. 3,000 counties, they were in the top 10. So they were motivated to do something. They took the lead and they created the Vision Zero action plan at the MPO level. And they did a very thorough job. They did what is, I think, a terrific job of data analysis, roadway system analysis, identified high crash corridors, put them together into high networks, overlaid that with some equity concerns, using data from the census, and then it had a selection, they did visitations to the sites, and they did a countermeasure selection, all very rational and sort of methodical, and arrived at this plan. I encourage you to take a look at that. But they attribute their success to being able to work with their partners in the region. They have Campus City and Hillsborough County, the big ones. Because they did the plan centrally, they enabled their local jurisdictions, the county and the city, to get SS4A grants. So you get an action plan, so they provide the action plan, but so they enabled the jurisdictions to get SS4A grant. So this was the role that Hillsborough served, which was, I think, very positive, but maybe unique to them. We also picked a state, Massachusetts. It's a state that's, you know, only slightly bigger than your region population, and they're sort of similar in that they are dealing with obviously a lot of jurisdictions. 80% of the roads in Massachusetts are under local control, so they had to work through layers of government and partners. So their success, I think, was based on their outreach. They had an executive steering committee that they formed, which had, I think, 18 state agencies, including a municipal association and also the Association of Chiefs of Police, and they used that to reach out to the community. They used their state highway safety plan as their Vision Zero plan and gained momentum in that way. So an example of an organization working at a higher level and trying to coordinate local jurisdictions that were under them. Madison, Wisconsin is a sort of different example, very progressive, small city of 150,000 people or so. They really sort of a good example, sort of building on strengths. They have a history of activism, local activism that had previously done some road work, sort of led by a bicycle movement. So they had this complete green streets program that was took place between 2000 and 20 up to 2020. That provided sort of a base and some momentum they were able to build on. And so they took advantage of a change in leadership. They had a new mayor and city council who were very invested in this. And they were able to create a Vision Zero plan and get momentum sort of built on, you know, their strength of activism. It did have some challenges. One of them was concern about disparities in traffic law enforcement. So another one was, you know, pushback about sharing the road, parking spaces, of course, biking. But they were able to overcome that with, on the one hand, a move to the safe system approach, which is, again, sort of more environmental, less individual, less enforcement focused. So that seemed more acceptable to the community. But they were able to, again, build on their strength. They were very explicit about exchanging speed for safety. The mayor has a quote in their action plan that Madison needs to slow down for safety. And so they were very explicit about sort of the conception of speed and safety in the community, but they were in a place where they could do that. Finally, a rural site that I just want to mention because I know you've got rural area, and this was really an example of a rural area that sort of did what they could incrementally to build up capacity. relying heavily on their state DOT. So it's really an example of a sort of low capacity county, which was able to rely on guidance and vision of the state DOT and sort of move by increments and be nurtured. One of the problems with staffing turnover, the state DOT is much more stable, and so the state DOT provided sort of an anchor for them, a way to bridge through staff turnover. Their lessons learned there, I think, are the importance of having a sort of a organization above that can help nurture this small, low capacity programs. They were able to rely on business. They have a big gas and oil and agriculture industry there, but they relied on the state Department of Transportation for direction. The state gathered the Vision Zero programs across the state every year, and there's some coordination collaboration. So I'll stop there and welcome any questions, comments.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Michael. Why don't you have a seat next to Paul, that way you guys can share the microphone maybe, and we will open it up to board members for any questions, either of our presenters. Who would like to go first? Chair Henderson.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentations. Paul, I wanted to ask, in your presentation, you talked about how getting to zero is not impossible, which I think for a lot of people, when we talk about Vision Zero, they sort of think of it as this mythical, we'll never reach it. And you refer to, I think, 3 jurisdictions that had managed to do so. Evanston, Hoboken, and someplace in
Edina, Minnesota.
Edina, Minnesota. Were there any things from those jurisdictions that stood out in terms of how they were able to accomplish this? Was it around enforcement? Was it major infrastructure changes? Was it a public education campaign? I think that's first off an incredible feat, especially if you have a city of 60,000, 70,000 people to be able to reach that. I'm just curious if you could say a little bit more about what they did.
Yeah, I think there are a few common elements. One of the, Dr. Jeff Michael's piece is their built environment is a lot of pre-1950s, and so it's a lot of compact residential neighborhoods that are pretty walkable, bikeable. And so that emphasis made it easier to install bike lanes and other different pieces in order to do the type of infrastructure in order to prioritize all different types of users who were already on the roads anyway. And so I think their built environment was one big piece. I know Minnesota generally, and both their state laws and on down, they have a pretty robust roadway safety series of like state and policies, and so they have like law enforcement and other things that I think are much higher acceptance, and they are pretty strict about a lot of different pieces. So I think that does also play a component to it. I think there's also maybe just a cultural element associated with it. So full disclosure, I'm originally from the state of Minnesota, but some of these places, like whenever I visit Washington and the Pacific Northwest, where I did college a few decades ago, and then living in Minnesota, I have to change my driving entirely because the way people drive, the way that people, not everyone's 2 feet from your bumper, and you don't get honked at if you don't immediately go on a green, those type of things. And I think there's a overall cultural sense that some of these communities and the way that they work and the way their norms are make it a lot easier to get to zero. And that is a really hard thing to get to.
Just note, I think City of Alexandria is at zero last year. And so everybody's here. Congratulations for them.
Yeah.
Great. Dr. Michael, I did have a question that I wanted to pose to you. You know, I had an experience last week that probably most of us up here, all of us up here have had. I went to visit some constituents who asked me to come see the crossing in front of their neighborhood school, the crosswalk where kids have to traverse every morning and afternoon to walk to and from school. And so I was there, some of the parents and kids were there, the principal from the school, a representative from the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, law enforcement. And the thing that struck me is all of us brought our own respective perspectives and expertise to that issue, right? Depending on our role or our background, we identified both different problems and different potential solutions. And sometimes we're talking past each other. So I'm wondering if you could share with us any best practices for folks from different professions and backgrounds to work together to address these issues. How can we bridge those divides that exist among all of us who want to address this issue?
Very good. Yeah, I think there are some structural things that communities can do in formalizing that kind of exchange. And, in those cities I mentioned, I think I mentioned Massachusetts had this cross-government executive leadership team. Well, that was their purpose, and in Hillsborough, they had a Vision Zero coalition that had sort of the similar purpose of exchanging ideas. In Madison, they have a Vision Zero steering team, but that seems to be an element of programs that make good progress. So they formalize that kind of exchange. There's definitely a need for establishing roles and responsibilities. And one gap that's quite common now, I think, is, I think the roadway people have seen enough of Vision Zero Safe System that they sort of understand what it is, and they sort of understand their role and at least the tactics for implementing it. Law enforcement is one sector which we've not reached very well. In fact, I think in some areas, law enforcement looks at Safe System and Vision Zero as sort of an alternative to them, that we used to do it our way, now we're doing it your way. That's not at all what it needs to be. And so I think that's one area where this kind of collaboration and, clear roles would be very useful, is to engage law enforcement in a comprehensive Vision Zero plan.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. And I think reference law enforcement and thinking back to what Supervisor Turner said earlier about the new COVID or post-COVID paradigm, I can just share from our perspective in Fairfax County, if you look at the data in terms of traffic citations issued in 2020 and 2021 and even into 2022, they were far below pre-pandemic levels. A lot of different reasons for that. One of them for us, which I suspect is true for others, is our police officers, were understaffed for a period of time, but also overwhelmed by the sheer volume of mental health related calls that they were receiving, right? And if you are, sitting at a dangerous intersection doing traffic enforcement and a call comes in, a mental health related call that somebody is in crisis and in danger, you're going to leave that traffic enforcement and go to that call. And in our case, because of the lack of state psychiatric hospitals, you might spend the rest of your shift dealing with that individual who's in crisis. So I think there was just a very real and practical impact in terms of enforcement that, at least for us, is now starting to improve, but feels to me like it must have been a driver in the increases in unsafe driving that we saw. Not the only driver, but a driver, at least in Fairfax. Supervisor Turner.
I noted on the slide that Loudoun County is the only DMV jurisdiction that does not have a Vision Zero plan, so I will take that back as a major homework assignment. In making the case to my colleagues on the board, what success metrics and outcomes can I convince them that we need a Vision Zero plan with? I noted that we completed 18 of 47 actions. Do we have results? And I noted that you said Alexandria hit 0, was it last year?
Yeah.
Last year? That's a great success story, and if we could get Fairfax to 0, then I can dangle that in front of the Loudoun board and say, "Look at Fairfax."
A few more people.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, why don't we, let's give Dr. Michael the chance to respond, because I think there was an initial question there.
Yeah, I wish there was a formula that you could show them that if this, you'll get that. It's not, quite like that, of course. And it is, it does take some faith. You have to have sort of faith in the laws of physics and sort of fundamental causes of crashes to go along with the safe system approach. But it is, it's sort of, I think, the right thing at the right time for us. Post-pandemic, we in the US experienced a huge increase in traffic deaths. At the same time, we're dissatisfied with the techniques that we had before, including law enforcement, because it doesn't seem to be being done as well as it used to be, or as thoroughly as it used to be. I think the timing is good for a sort of a shift towards a different approach. But the benefits, if we're changing the built environment, those things take time. So I think there has to be reasonable expectations.
Okay, let's go to Supervisor Angry. She stole my microphone here.
Oh, great.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. I didn't know if you were gonna come in or.
Yeah, maybe 20 seconds. I think one way to do is to start with specific groups that you think might be particularly amenable to organizing the actions. Are usually school groups or church groups, like around schools. The level of controversy of speeding excessively around a school zone is like people are pretty intolerant of it. So finding opportunities to, we want to make sure all the schools within a quarter mile are safe, and having that as kind of a success story that you can build upon versus trying to do it all at once.
That's a good answer.
All at once, because my question or comment really is, Vision Zero is a big goal because it covers so many categories. Just 2 weeks ago, I had another pedestrian, 66-year-old lady, walking her dog, 7 o'clock in the morning, hit and killed. And that's just, that makes no sense to me. One of the things that everyone always talks about is, well, can we get speed bumps or speed disabled in our maybe community roads? Well, from the process that I know, it takes, they gotta, basically get 80% of the community to sign, petitions saying they want it, and then they go. So I'm curious, as we're talking about this summit, I feel like we need more control of that. And I know that's probably gonna be a Richmond issue because we're dealing with state and we don't have that authority now. But when it comes to the fact that, we have many of these neighborhood roads that people don't stop at stop signs, that there's passing cars on a community road, and this is how these accidents are happening. Even if you put a speed bump in, I just feel like there should be a little more authority for us as elected officials to really go and use safety as that ground, nexus to put in more measures to actually help these communities without going through the process that takes years to really finally, let's say, get a speed table in or speed bump in or whatever that plan could be. So
maybe I'll start now. I think as elected officials and others, you get to set the policy and priorities and other pieces with your departments of public works and transportation. And if you set default policies towards safety, then it makes it so that you have to argue against making something safer. So in one example, it's Cambridge, Massachusetts. They default whenever they're doing road work, they create a separated bike lane. And so if anyone protests it, then that is the default. So you have to say that this is not an acceptable default because X, Y, and Z, and make a case versus having everyone show up in order to get a separated bike lane. So you could get policies in place of like, if we've identified issues related to this, then it'll be standard practice that this will be the intervention. That's one way to do it.
Yeah, I think you have to start with what you can do. And perhaps, perhaps law enforcement is that thing you can do immediately. The other changes take longer, both C-wise and finance-wise and implementation. So you have to, do them all, but start where you can, I think. But when you do enforcement, you can't expect it to solve everything. You have to be, sort of working at the bottom of the pyramid as you're doing, things higher. But you have to really do them all.
Okay, I don't want to forget our folks who have joined virtually, and Ms. Russell has had her hand up for a few minutes. So Ms. Russell, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank Vice Chair Walkinshaw for the story that he told, because it's absolutely on point and makes a lot of sense. In recent years, just as an example, our police department, we used to, we did crash reporting, and that was kind of separate from engineering and DPW, and now we have a team. And so all traffic issues come into the same place. They're sort of triaged and then looked at holistically by all of those teams. So there's been a culture shift here in Frederick, where I am. But I wanted to ask a question about reporting, because the state of Maryland has a standard crash reporting system. I assume Virginia does, that DC does. Is it asking all the same questions? Are we getting consistent data so that when we're analyzing this and we're coming up with these top causes, is it apples to apples? Has there been any discussion about a regional reporting system or even a national reporting system that has consistency?
Okay, I might ask Conti, or who might be able to answer that question, which is a great question about regional reporting. I guess there's maybe two parts to that question. Where are we in our region? And then maybe for our two panelists, if they have any thoughts they want to share on this question nationally.
I'm gonna, Jenny, our safety lead, one thing we are doing at the MPO level, we are using the federal FAST data system in terms of having consistently improved data points. So one of the things we do when we did a deep dive and started looking at jurisdiction specific data, where we do find there are differences in how certain crashes are defined, what is defined a serious injury crash in one jurisdiction changes with how it is done in another jurisdiction. So within our region, there is that diversity. So, but with the federal system, we tend to get a normalized, if you will, as much as it can be normalized.
And I'll also add that there is a lag, unfortunately, with the federal system. And so when we want up-to-date information, we're having to rely on jurisdictional and state databases, which, as Conti mentioned, there are some discrepancies between those data sets.
Okay, Mr. Tesher, Dr. Michael, anything to add on those? I feel like USDOT probably has some thoughts on this.
Yeah, there's a kind of ill acronym called the MUC, Model Minimum Uniform Crash Criteria, and that just the latest edition came out. And there's at the state level, it's the have a crash data discretionary grant that I'm not sure if Virginia and Maryland and the district applied for, but that also has some kind of standardization components to it. So I think that there's usually a baseline, but it's usually some of the nuances, particularly if you're looking at like contributing factors. Sometimes it can be hard to do across jurisdiction to get consistent reporting.
Okay, thank you. We're going to give Mr. Weisberg the final question for this session.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. First of all, great to see you, Jeff. And also, thank you for recognizing our SS4 award, which we're in the process of implementing at 7 corridors or seven sub-projects. A couple of questions. One, Dr. Michael, I think in your presentation, the pyramid that you showed sort of had, it was bundled with some other things, but it essentially was land use as sort of, one of the sort of larger areas for targeting. Any thoughts on approaches that can be implemented at the regional level with regards to land use? And I sort of a different question, but I'll bundle them. Is there a preferred methodology in establishing HINs or methodologies? So I'll throw those two questions out there.
I might ask our transportation planners for their point of view on land use and road safety, but generally, we're trying to reduce the amount of high-risk time that people spend on the road. And if you have remote residential areas that are commuting to, say, dense job areas, it takes an hour each way, then that's just a lot of exposure. And even if crashes happen at a low rate, you're going to have lots of them because you've got so many people. So anything that can reduce that risk exposure. At the same time, you have to watch the other end of the spectrum, which is those communities that are not traveling too much. In fact, they're not traveling enough because they don't have access to affordable transportation. So I think the land use question is complicated, and it maybe has to be looked at as part of a longer term vision. That's good. Okay, good. Thank you, Rick.
Great, thanks. And then other preferred methodologies for establishing HINs. That might be Mr. Teicher's.
Yeah, start. I think the more traditional way is looking at past crashes, serious and fatal. You can also look at contributing road features. So if you know that you've seen crashes that are roadway departures in certain types of curves on 2-lane county roads, then you can look and take similar types of curves and situations. Well, there hasn't been a fatality there. That might be one that would be big. But I think usually it's historical data combined with some, looking at attributes related to geometry, infrastructure, use and other things. And I don't think there's no true way to do it. I think there's a lot of consultants who will sell you something that is their true way. But I think there's maybe one other consideration is not just those, but also thinking about other factors that might be useful. So in our case, we think about equity a little bit and like the type of users, both for who's using the road as well as those communities. And that can be, it could be very socioeconomic. It could also be like, it's just a lot of people who are elderly or young or those type of things. So I think there's a lot of different ways to cut it. And there's some good established practices that I think cut it at both the government level as well as private sector that have been kind of in play over the past few years.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. If you could join me in thanking our guest panelists for the presentation. Okay, so we're going to take our 15-minute break. So we'll reconvene. It is 11:12. Just going to round it out and just say we're going to get started at 11:30. So I think the signs are outside in terms of pointing you towards where the restrooms are. I think there's still some refreshments outside as well. So we'll take our 15-minute break. Thank you.
Thank you.
Big thanks for getting excited.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much to our speakers and presenters in the first and second session. We now get to move to what I would call sort of our more interactive conversation, which is around development and recommendations for TPB action. When I talked with Conti and the staff about, doing this summit, I thought it was very important for us to come out with some action items as opposed to just having a conversation for the sake of having a conversation. But, how do we truly move things forward, recognizing all that we know about the data from what's happening across the region, but now also a little bit more insight into what's happening in other places in the country where they have seen more success in bringing down their numbers. And so I hope that we can come out of session 3 with a short but impactful list of action items that we can take back to the rest of the members of the TPB who can join us for today. And hopefully we could take some action on this in our December meeting. And so with that, I'm happy to open it up for any suggestions or conversations for board members in terms of some things that they think would be helpful in this. I will say, just as a reminder to folks, that in 2021, TPB did do a safety resolution where we called on the member jurisdictions to do a variety of different things. And so this would not be the first time that we've done something like this, but I'm gonna stop talking and open it up. Okay, and I'm gonna give a suggestion. Thinking about back to the 2021 safety resolution, which the TPB did pass, I don't feel like since then that we've done some sort of evaluation or review of like what the rest of the jurisdictions have done to sort of meet those things. And I feel like in many ways, Maryland, Virginia, DC have all been sort of progressing in a variety of different ways, but there is no central document or central understanding of what everyone is doing. And I think that might be helpful.
I agree 100% with that. And I think we saw some dots on one of the slides about different Vision Zero commitments and different policies that jurisdictions in our region have undertaken. In Fairfax, we, in 2022, developed and adopted a Safe Streets for All policy, and we've subsequently committed $100 million of local money in addition to existing programs to funding pedestrian and bicycle safety projects. And I suspect if we had that compilation of the different efforts that are taking place around the region, it would allow us to know where we stand, but also maybe give all of us ideas of more we could be doing that others have done to find some success. I also wanted to just maybe this is an obvious suggestion, and I already sent a message to our DOT director about the Allies in Action program, but it seems to me that it would make perfect sense for TPB to pledge its support to the Allies in Action program and add ourselves to that list. I suspect we would be able to give already a pretty compelling description of the work that we do that's consistent with the program and the program's goals.
Oh, Neil.
Right here.
Sorry.
Thanks. So with the theme of collecting data and sharing it among jurisdictions, I have to say that when I joined the city council, I was skeptical about speed cameras. I was thinking that they were just revenue collection devices. But I've seen the data that's been supplied, and they clearly are very effective. We just had a session at our city council meeting this past Monday about pedestrian safety after having a couple of very serious incidents within our city. And residents, one of their biggest requests was more automated enforcement, particularly because we don't have enough police police officers to go around and do all the enforcement that is needed, and people have developed some significantly bad habits in the last few years, looks like. But we're under some serious restrictions legally in terms of where we can put speed cameras. We can't put them on or stop sign cameras in every neighborhood and speed cameras on every spot of the road. I think if we can collectively pull the data together and show our legislators how effective they are, they may relax some of the restrictions so that we can do more automated enforcement. Because some of the things that we've talked about today are expensive and time consuming, or they're limited resources, but that's something that I think could be impactful in the near term. And if we can make our case that it's effective and not just a revenue generating device, I think that would go a long way to move the needle forward and reduce the body count.
Thanks, yeah. All right, so I'm taking notes here. So we're at comprehensive review of what is taking place since the 2021 resolution, pledge support for the Allies in Action program, some data collection on ATE to inform some of the work at the state legislature and hopefully get them to relax some of the restrictions. Drew?
Sure. So I think in the space of advocacy, and I asked a question earlier because this is something that at MDOT we've been starting to look at because there are areas where even as a state DOT, some of our jurisdiction ends. And so I think thinking about a federal advocacy strategy for COG and TPB, and I'll give a great example of one that we all could dive into tomorrow, which is that NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, is proposing a new federal motor vehicle safety standard to ensure passenger vehicles of a certain size can mitigate the risk to fatal injury in child and adult pedestrian crashes. So this is trying to make the bigger, larger vehicles we heard about safer for people who aren't in vehicles, which we heard about is a major source of increase in crashes. That docket ends on November 18th, so that would be an interesting first opportunity. But I think that is a space where we've seen NHTSA and NTSB and US DOT interested, and we should play a role.
I asked a follow-up in terms of when you talk about the federal advocacy strategy, it sounds as though you're calling for us to be more engaged and commenting on some of these policies that are coming out.
Sure, that would be the recommendation.
Okay. David?
Thanks very much. Well, first of all, this is easy because I agree with all the recommendations that have been made so far. And I know Clark is going to talk about reciprocity of violations, which again, I think is something that would be totally supportive. I think conceptually, in addition to those specific things, I think we ought to link back what we do to the major problems that we see in the region. And they are, you know, the list that I asked for the expert that we heard from Fairfax County, intersection issues, vehicles leaving the highway, which I suspect reflect DUI or speeding or other factors, and then speeding, wearing seatbelts, DUI. Each of these have different components, whether it's the vehicle, the person, or the highway, and some are more highway oriented, some are more behavior oriented. So hopefully we can link back to exact problems that we've identified in our regions in terms of metrics of success. But right now, in terms of moving forward, I totally agree, particularly with the focus on electronic enforcement and gathering the safety data from all around the region, putting it into one place so we can all use it in our advocacy efforts to get the authority that we need in that area. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question, David? Do you feel like, so for example, for cities of Falls Church, that you all have good data about what the cause was of a particular crash or fatality? So for instance, she gave, I think it was Vanessa, who gave the list of things. Is that being reported out in your jurisdiction where you could say X number of fatalities were caused by DUI, X number of fatalities might have been prevented should the person if the person had been wearing a seatbelt, those kinds of things?
Well, fortunately, we haven't had fatalities. That's great. Recently. I think you're putting your finger on a key point, which is we need to know better what the data is and where the failings of the data are. We just had our police chief and we were talking about that. And there are some gaps in data and the ability to track back conversation. So I think maybe we add that to another. It's another thing we should all look at. That is, what is the current reporting data? How good is it, and is it uniform? Thanks.
So since the topic's been mentioned, kind of back up a couple of years, and I was in Richmond at the time as the governor's chief of staff and got a resolution that was passed by the Council of Governments in mid to late December of 21 on ticket restaurants. I read the letter and I thought to myself, generally familiar with COG, why are we getting a resolution passed to us with 14 days left in office? We cannot effectuate any change in this policy. We have both feet out the door. Our offices are cleared out. Called up to the district and said, what is this issue? And I said, it's our number one legislative priority. I said, I've been in Richmond for 12 years. I've never heard of it. Ran the traps. It had never been flagged for the governor's office as an issue. The governor at the time was a neurologist. He still is a neurologist, but treats a lot of children, student patients today who have been hit by vehicles. Very sympathetic to this issue. A couple weeks ago, September 17th, a middle school student, 12-year-old girl, an 11, 13-year-old, using a crosswalk to get from her middle school to her public library in DC, was hit by someone running a crosswalk. Had 94 unpaid tickets, 6 speeding tickets just in the month of September, 4 tickets for running a red light, $20,000 of unpaid fines and fees. The lack of reciprocity is not a revenue generating issue for the council or for the members around this dais. It is a safety issue. And there are other examples of people losing their lives over this. So we talk about enforcement, we talk about behavior changes, we've got the data. I said earlier, from October to March of 22 to 23, there's 140,000 unpaid tickets just in that time period in Maryland, 84,000 unpaid in Virginia, and 60,000 unpaid in the district. I'm convinced if we can bring our DMVs and our secretaries together to discuss this, we can have a level-headed discussion of what a path forward looks like. There's not full reciprocity between Maryland and Virginia and DC. I think that would be something that would need to be discussed. There's a discussion of the fines and fees, what they would go towards. I have suggested, with my COG hat on, is there a regional transportation transit priority where there's a safety nexus that money could go to help us all? We do a lot of work on Metro. There's a huge need there. Perhaps there are regional funding buckets where we could agree some amount of money would go that could help all 3 jurisdictions. And or kind of lastly, talking with the district's DMV director, could we at least get a consensus that if you have someone that has 94 unpaid tickets and has accrued 6 speeding violations in a month, that person should not be on the road, and can Virginia, Maryland, DC share that kind of data? So at the COG level, and COG houses the TPB, but the funding streams and work plans are separate. We could use some help by getting folks around the table and getting a commitment just to share this data. I was unaware, and was served at a high level in Virginia, that you can get a license plate and not live in the Commonwealth of Virginia. 100,000 Maryland addresses with Virginia license plates. Maryland's losing out on $12 million in registration fees every year. Virginia's getting $6 million. There are buckets of money here that we should talk about, and maybe that leads to we should have the same registration fee for the DMV, right? Virginia is half of what it is in Maryland. There's a reason why people come across to get their license plate, but we should perhaps have that discussion and not be afraid to put all these data points and issues on the table and talk about them. But keep hearing for the last year and a half since I've been at COG, safety first, we got to enforce the laws on the books. Well, this is an obvious place where we're not enforcing the laws on the books, and it's having a direct nexus to safety. So I would appreciate if it's part of the work plan. I would pledge our COG staff and our legislative affairs folks to work with. And then lastly, and I promise I'll zip it up, I'm passionate about this. I often think people pay more attention to what I do in my day job than they do. I think it's the most important stuff in the world, right? So used to come home in my old job and ask people what they thought about Medicaid expansion or minimum wage increase, and they'd say, I didn't know you were working on that. I didn't know that was a thing. How did you not know? I have flagged this issue of ticket reciprocity for a Senate Majority Leader in Virginia, completely unaware of it as an issue. And our number 2 budget appropriator in the House, completely unaware of it as an issue. Both of them saying, we would like to work on this. We would like to solve it. So if you're in the district and think this is an issue that everyone knows about, I think the communications on it over the last several years has not been nearly as wide as it should be. And I think putting it on the TPB work plan and socializing this a bit can help us find some consensus.
So sad as a district council member that our friends in Northern Virginia and Southern Maryland have not been sharing our pain with everybody else in the state. But no, I've added that. I think that's an excellent idea to bring together the DMV directors of the relevant regions as well as the DOT folks to just put folks in a room and start having a true conversation and looking at some of the data on this. I think it might actually be quite illuminating. I see Kelly Russell, I see your hand is up. I didn't know if that was an old hand or a new hand.
Well, my hands are old, but it's a new hand. I just wanted to pile on to the idea that we have a powerful tool in our advocacy. Just one example, the state of Maryland right now, the Maryland Municipal League's top legislative priority is getting the ability of non-sworn personnel to be able to sign off on automated enforcement. And the reason that this is important is because unless you have a sworn officer to sign off on the citations, you can't have a speed camera program. And if you're a small jurisdiction without a police department, you're gonna have to pay another police department or not get a program. So I think things like this are really important areas where TPB and COG can weigh in with regional advocacy on those legislative things that people are working on that will give better access and ability to use these programs. So I'm just going to lean on our advocacy.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks, Kelly. Maria.
Thank you. Obviously, safety is in everybody's mind, and it's going to take a several-pronged approach. Legislation being one of them for enforcement or which have you. Addressing the driver behavior for the users of the facilities is also another one, but specifically about the infrastructure. I would like to encourage and Virginia is already starting to do that, to look into a more systemic way of addressing the various improvements or countermeasures that we can do. We used to address after the fact, areas where we had high crashes or fatalities, and we shifted that paradigm, and actually the General Assembly approved more safety money for these type of improvements. And we changed the paradigm about 2020, where we are addressing low-cost countermeasures to address the most amount of public, using data. And we're doing that in 2 stages. In fact, today for Northern Virginia jurisdictions is the last day to apply for systemic improvements grants, that we have money available for that. And the type of improvements we're talking about is, as somebody mentioned before, areas where maybe road departure is a problem, areas where the intersections need to be more visible, areas where we don't have pedestrian crossings. And we are investing over $600 million of safety monies in order to do that. It's not enough, it's never enough, but at least we're making strides toward that. The other thing that I would like to encourage as a region to do is to take advantage of technology. The person here from Federal Highway Administration indicated that we have been working on some of the speed synchronization. We have the first on I-95, I don't know if anybody's driven it, where the VMS signs advises to lower the speed because something is happening ahead. Whether people is heeding to that advice or not is up to everybody's choice. But that alone has decreased the rate of crashes by 11%. 11% might not seem much, but when you're talking about a facility that carries over 200,000 cars per day, that's quite a bit. And just in contrast, the areas that do not have that on the same corridor have seen an increase in crashes by 40%. So technology is something that I think we should explore a little bit more. And just to tap to that, and my final thought is, we are also working with our Virginia Tech Research Council to work with the industry to the same technology of the variable speeds and for right now it's a choice, right? But if you are to have that technology in your car, you can also have the choice to connect to that particular technology where your car can help you and reduce the speed for you. And again, that's something you can turn on and off, but there's certain technology that is out there already today that I think maybe we could encourage the region to utilize.
All right. Any other of the, oh, yes.
Everything Bart said, I totally agree with. It's staggering to me that A, we don't have reciprocity, and B, you can get a Virginia license plate with violations. Really, that's top priority for me. I'm really surprised. Speed cameras, a little off topic, but I'll get there. We passed a plastic bag tax in Loudoun County, and I got an email from a constituent, maybe not a constituent, I think it was the whole board from Loudoun County, and said, how dare you raise my taxes? I'm going to show you. I'm going to bring my own bag to the supermarket. And speed cameras are going to be the same thing. We're going to get massive pushback about how dare you raise taxes when in fact we're trying to change behavior. If you have, and we do that, we preface that discussion with the national metrics on if you charge a bag tax, it changes behavior significantly. And it has in Loudoun County. So I'm a firm advocate of speed cameras, and we're gonna have to weather that PR storm and just hunker down and realize we're trying to change behaviors, and I think that will. And then the last one is, I'd really like us to find out what works from the various Vision Zero plans around the country, and then marry them against Dave's priority list of things that are the most important priorities, rank ordered, and see if we have an overlap between the vision plan implementation features that work and our list of priorities, because we might have a one-for-one match in several instances, which can really cut down the analysis time and get us right to ground zero on what kind of elements we should have in our Vision Zero plan. That's it.
Thanks, Mike. Any other, oh, Drew?
Others who haven't spoken.
No. I mean, after you go, if you want to pass the mic, folks in the audience, because this is audience participation of a summit, we're going to give you an opportunity to weigh in too. So have your juices flowing.
So I do want to add, I think, with Supervisor Turner's comment, that sort of clearinghouse of information on where are we vis-a-vis best practices. I've flagged, ignition interlock, but everything, and I think the conversation about what are the sources of crashes and are we doing what best practices would say we would do consistently seems like a great idea from our perspective, and our team's certainly happy to support. I do want to flag the conversation about data sharing and strategy around automated traffic enforcement and reciprocity. Definitely an important topic to continue, and I think the state of Maryland certainly is agreed that somebody going 25 miles per hour over the speed limit on Pennsylvania Avenue doesn't slow down when it becomes Maryland 4. And so we are certainly interested in the safety nexus here. I do think given the regional conversations around revenue and safety, we need to think about how we talk about this in the, what our core goals are and how we, step forward incrementally with safety focus. And I think the data sharing is a great place to start, of making sure we're aware of who and where they are and what communities across the region are being affected. So I'd love to talk more about how we step into that conversation in a way that helps all of us.
Kind of wish Charles Allen were here. This would like be warming his little heart on all of this reciprocity conversation. Okay, so what I have so far, comprehensive review of what has taken place in our various member jurisdictions since 2021. Pledge support for the Allies in Action program. We need to get some better data on automated traffic enforcement. This, again, that's what Mike said, right? This is about changing behavior, not, moving towards punishment. Improving on our federal advocacy strategy for COG and TPB, so that engaging more and commenting on policy proposals. And I think, as Kelly said, sort of leaning in on that front. what is the current reporting data? Is it being appropriately disaggregated by cause or injury and death? Do we have a good idea of what's driving our numbers in our region? Bringing folks together, DMV directors, DOT directors, DOT directors, to talk to get reciprocity and just overall regional safety, explore use of technology, send, I'm gonna call nudges of info, to drivers via signage or otherwise to also aid in our efforts to get folks to slow down. Taking a look at the Vision Zero plans from around the country and seeing what those best practices are and seeing where we are as a region in comparison to that. I think those are, we've heard a couple of repeats, but I think those were the distinct ones. Shannon.
Hi, so Tacoma Park, 17,500 people, and I just want to highlight that sometimes collecting data can be very expensive for a small municipality like Tacoma Park. And so if we know that lowering the speed limit from 40 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour is going to save lives, if we know that the electronic enforcement of, stop light cameras and speed cameras are going to help slow people down, I would rather be able to extrapolate from what we've already seen affect other places rather than have to assume that every single small municipality is going to have to do that research on that. So just making sure that we're keeping that in mind when we're talking about that collection. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely take note of that. I think though, I sort of learned in DC, there is information that's already collected, it's just not being aggregated. So for instance, I'm assuming Tacoma Park has a medical examiner of some sort, or.
I mean, Montgomery County's.
Montgomery. But some of that data, most people don't talk to their OC&E offices to get their information about what were the causes of a fatality based on their own review. And that is, I don't think, like the Department of Transportation or DMV would need to do anything extra. It's just getting the sources of information that already exist and pulling it together. Okay, I want to turn to folks out in the public. I don't know if you have any recommendations that we should offer. If you could just introduce yourself, that'd be fantastic.
My name is Mark Doyle with the Northern Virginia Families for Safe Streets. So we're a pedestrian safety organization. We have a near-miss dangerous location app that is a real-time crowdsourcing data taken by people on the streets. They can put it on a survey. We use that for advocacy. We try to get changes. We've been doing this for a while and trying to get changes in the, not only the local level, but at the state jurisdictional and at the state legislative level. And we've had problems at the state legislative level. And part of our challenge is getting sufficient data, because that does resonate with most people, not everyone, but most people, and the equity issue. So with the speed safety cameras, we don't call them speed cameras, speed safety cameras, is resisted by some of the minority underserved community members because they have a history of not great relationships with enforcement, and they don't see the data. And we're trying to get the data together. So we use TREDS, but it's difficult to get that information on a granular level. And I can tell you from the grassroots advocacy that we do, when you show people this data on a dashboard, and you show their neighborhood, and you show the near miss, but you also show the crash data, they go, oh my God, and it starts to hit them. It's very difficult, though, to get that data from different jurisdictions. And any way that we can get a commitment to try to improve, and we're just talking about Virginia, not to mention the other state. And so that would be great to be able to have a consistent source of data in not only Virginia, but other places in the area. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I just wanted to speak to your comments briefly and Virginia Families for Safe Streets is a great example of a, really grassroots community organization that is out doing life-saving work on this issue. And I could speak to data with respect to the speed safety cameras. And I think it's a great point that we need to gather that data for TPB so folks understand it. And Fairfax maybe is a good use case because our pilot program, school zone speed safety cameras are relatively limited. So they're not ubiquitous in Fairfax County. So that has allowed us to really analyze the impacts. When there's a camera located in a place that didn't have one before and all of the surrounding roadways don't have one, what are the impacts on speed? And we saw in our pilot program a reduction in average speeds from anywhere from 13% to 23% reduction when the cameras went on. And that's been pretty consistent around the county. And we're going to be taking that data to the General Assembly in the upcoming session and sharing that and trying to address concerns that they might have down there about the program in the hopes of being able to expand it. But that kind of data might be useful for other TPP jurisdictions outside of Virginia as well.
Thank you. All right, does anyone have any additional recommendations? We're at 8. I guess ending on an even number is okay, but if there were 2 more, it would be a nice round 10. Dave, see, look at that. Inspired.
Thanks. Thank you very much. So one would be, that in addition to all of these, when we're thinking about this conceptually, let's link it to the particular issues that we have heard. The causes of fatalities and serious injuries in the region. It's more a conceptual thing. It's more like a framework or a matrix, but these other specific issues all go to one or more of those particular elements.
So just a fine point on that. So linking responses specifically to, what was the title?
To the specific causes that have been identified.
Okay, to the specific, okay, yep.
Serious injuries in the region. But again, that doesn't substitute the particular actions that we're talking about are all fantastic, but it's just conceptually okay to show that we're actually making progress, link it to the problems that we're trying to address.
Madam Chair, related to what Mr. Snyder indicated, one of my comments indicated that perhaps addressing a way of preventive measures for a systemic program might be more effective than addressing spot improvements after the fact. So obviously the gathering of the data is going to be helpful to help us address that.
So being more proactive as opposed to reactive.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was inspired by the fact that there was a slide describing a source of federal funding that I personally wasn't aware of and I shared with staff. Perhaps TPB could compile and serve as a clearinghouse for opportunities like that for significant funding that come out of the federal government. Money is always helpful.
It is. Unfortunately, I learned that one that Paul was talking about, that program, is for state DOTs, which means the District of Columbia is not eligible unless we have some other, I don't know, fake program that we call our local person. Anywho, any other things?
I've got one.
Oh, great, Mike.
I know we're over 10.
Oh, good.
It's just a thought, and I'm not really strongly linked to it, but in sort of encompassing what Clark brought up, could TPB initiate a regional Vision Zero plan for the entire DMV region It would only include elements that we all agree on. But that might serve to open up some coffers for federal funding at a regional level that might not be available to the individual jurisdictions if we combine our efforts. And then it would provide an obvious umbrella for ticket reciprocity and for licensing and everything else under that umbrella. Just a thought.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone. One thing I won't add to the list, but something that we just did this year in the district that I think some other jurisdictions around the country have done. Sometimes when folks hear Vision Zero, they traditionally think of it as part of their transportation program, or it's housed in their Department of Transportation or their transportation office. We've actually just added a staff person to focus on Vision Zero at the Department of Health. And there are some other jurisdictions around the country where their Vision Zero program is in their health department, their public health department, bringing that intersection around the fact that this is really about public safety and the health of a community and the environment, and ensuring that folks can get from one place to the other without fear of injury or death. So that might be an interesting approach there too. Well, I want to thank everyone for their engagement today. I'm going to turn it over to Conti for some closing remarks and some marching orders. And as far as these particular recommendations, we'll make sure the staff types it all up and we'll circulate it to all of the members. And I guess talk about something. Well, I'll making a note for myself that I will talk about it in my chair remarks at the November TPB meeting in advance of us voting on something in December.
Thank you. I want to thank all the members who came and all the guests and our guest speakers as well. This has been very helpful. Apart from being very informative, it's been very directional setting for staff. So one of the things for the TPB November meeting, we will have this as an agenda item as well. And we will work with the officers of the board, the executive committee, to ensure that we have captured all of the ideas that has been proposed. So many of them might lend themselves to board advising staff to just begin work on it as part of our work activities. That is doable. I've been making notes on that. If there are one or two items such as a regional Vision Zero goal, if some of those are partnering with COG on moving, not just on ticket reciprocity, but holding the dangerous drivers to account sort of initiative. If any of those, the executive committee advisors requires some sort of a resolution, we can discuss that in November and bring it back in December. But all of these are things that what I've heard and my colleagues have heard, these are all doable. There's a bunch of things that we as the MPO can help, is whether it's best practices, data compilation, assisting board members with their legislative efforts. Those are all doable. So that's a quick overview of what I've been making a note. So thank you all very much. With this, we can conclude just a couple things. We have provided box lunches in here, so you are please welcome. We have the facility for a few more hours. Please feel welcome to sit here, enjoy your lunch, or on the patio. You can enjoy a good day. And for those of you, all of you here and those of you on the webinar, all of the presentations that were shared today are already on the COG website. All of the background materials are on the COG website. So you should have all of that. And you all have my and our staff's email addresses. Any thoughts or ideas or inspirations that come to you after today, after now, please send them to us and we'll be looking forward to it. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Jim.
All right. Thank you everyone again for your attendance today. Please join us for some lunch, and I guess this meeting is adjourned.